United States and its partners have launched Operation Epic Fury, the most lethal, most complex, and most precise aerial operation in history.
Our military in the Middle East is undertaking an unprecedented operation to eliminate Iran's ability to threaten Americans, as they've been doing for nearly half a century.
Combat operations continue at this time in full force, and they will continue until all of our objectives are achieved.
From February 28th till today, the Middle East has been transformed by a fast-moving war between the United States, Israel and Iran. And in this edition of From the News Desk, we will walk you through the key visuals that define this very war. From the very first joint US-Israeli airstrikes that opened the war and killed Ali Khamenei, the explosions over Tehran, Iran's missile salvo on US bases across the Gulf, and most importantly, the massive bombardment of Iranian sites that continues day in and day out. We break down battlefield footage to show how Washington and Tel Aviv are trying to cripple Iran's nuclear and missile program, and how Tehran is hitting back across the region, and why this week's attack have pushed the entire Gulf to the edge. So stay with us as we explain the war step by step through the most important visuals from the 28th of February up to this very moment. Well, Operation Epic Fury opened with images that looked almost unreal. Night vision and thermal footage released by US Central Command showing precision strikes rippling through Iranian targets within seconds. From the very first wave, the US signaled that this would be a campaign of overwhelming air and naval power, designed to degrade Iran's ability to wage war from land, air and sea simultaneously. One of the latest and most symbolic blows came at sea, where the US Navy hunted down Iran's first dedicated drone carrier, the IRIS Shahid Bagheri. CENTCOM confirmed that US forces struck and crippled the ship, with multiple reports indicating that this very vessel was left sinking in the Gulf region as part of a broader naval campaign to dismantle Iran's maritime strike capabilities. In fact, now US officials maintain that as many as 30 Iranian vessels were destroyed or rendered inoperable in the first week of this very war, underlying a clear message: Washington would not allow Tehran to project unmanned and missile power from the sea. Now moving on to the skies over Iran. The US brought out the heaviest and the most sophisticated bombers from its arsenal. First, let's talk about B-2 stealth bombers, which are rarely seen in such sustained operations. In fact, they were filmed leaving a US base with a 2,000-pound bombs with the target to strike hardened underground ballistic missile complexes deep inside Iranian territory. Their thermal signatures blooming on CENTCOM released footage as bunkers and missile silos went up in the flames. Now, alongside the B-2's B-1 Lancer bombers conducted long-range strike missions against Iranian ballistic missile infrastructure, with Pentagon released video showing B-1s taking off under heavy load to strike deep inside Iran to degrade Iranian ballistic missile capabilities. Now comes the US Air Force's iconic long-range workhorses were also deployed in this very campaign. Their role highlighted in US media reports emphasizing that they had just did something huge in the expanding Iran operation, reinforcing the sense of a layered multi-platform air assault. Now, the result on the ground for Iran's Air Force was also immediate and brutal. Now, US footage and briefings describe jets and support aircraft caught on the tarmac, destroyed in precision runway and hangar strikes, designed not just to crater airfields, but to systematically erase Iran's ability to sortie high-value combat aircrafts. Now, not only CENTCOM images, but satellite imagery points to extensive damage at multiple Iranian air bases, where hardened shelters and exposed aircraft alike were targeted as part of Epic Fury's effort to strip Tehran of air power before it could be fully realized what has just happened. Well, the same philosophy drove the offensive against Iran's land-based missile forces. Well, US officials said hundreds of targets had been hit since the opening of this very campaign, including mobile missile launchers, air defense batteries, and command and control nodes across Iran. Thermal footage released by the US showed missiles slamming into Iranian military vehicles identified as part of Tehran's missile and rocket network and destroying them within seconds. Well, it underscores what the US Secretary of Defense described as surgical, overwhelming and unapologetic strikes focused on Iranian offensive missile capabilities. Now at sea, the campaign extends beyond the Shahid Bagheri. CENTCOM confirmed a sustained naval campaign in the Gulf of Oman and surrounding waters targeting key IRGC naval assets, including missile platforms and forward-based ships. In this naval battle, US forces repeatedly used a mix of air-launched weapons and undersea capabilities, including the Iranian warship taken out by a torpedo strike in the Indian Ocean. Well, it's a reminder that the undersea dimension of US-powered submarines operating unseen was also in play. And by hitting Iranian warships, drone carriers and maritime command nodes, Washington aimed to push the fight back onto Iranian soil and deprive Tehran of its ability to threaten commercial ships and allied vessels at sea. Now, all of this taken together, the flaming wreck of a drone carrier, the rolling shockwaves from B-2 bunker busters runs, the shattered remnants of jets on ruined runways, the silent work of torpedoes under blank water, Operation Epic Fury has become a live demonstration of how lethal and coordinated US air-sea power can be when unleashed without restraint. Yet even under this bombardment, Iran has not collapsed. Instead, it has launched a retaliation that has shocked many observers who believed Tehran would be unable to respond at this very scale. Well, within hours of initial US-Israel strikes, Iran fired back with volleys of drones and ballistic missiles, fired first at Israel and then at US military infrastructure across the wider Gulf region. Now, Western and regional officials say Iran has launched hundreds of missiles and thousands of drones in this phase of war, forcing air defense systems from multiple countries into near continuous action. In fact, US bases in the Middle East stretching from Jordan and Iraq to Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have also been among Iran's principal targets. Now, according to international media reports, Iranian missiles and drones have struck at or near these facilities, causing varying level of damage and casualties even as a large portion of the projectiles were intercepted. Now, parallelly, Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon has opened another front, with rockets and missile attacks on Israel, deepening the regional nature of the war and tying down Israeli air and missile defense that might otherwise be concentrated on Iran. Nowhere, however, has Iran's counter-punch been more strategically consequential than in and around the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow choke point through which roughly a fifth of the world's oil passes. Well, after the initial phase of Epic Fury and the strikes on Shahid Bagheri, Iran moved to restrict traffic through the strait, employing drones, missiles, and threat of sea mines and fast attack craft to create climate of extreme risk for commercial shippings. Now, multiple reports warn that Iranian drone attacks and related activities could disrupt the Strait of Hormuz for months, with traders bracing for repeated shocks to global oil and gas flow as long as the crisis endures. Well, these actions in Hormuz are not merely symbolic. They represent Tehran's attempt to translate its asymmetric strengths like drones, missiles, small boats, mines into global leverage. Even as its major naval platforms take hits, Iran continues to field a large inventory of shore-based UAV launch sites, coastal anti-ship missile batteries, and swarms of smaller craft capable of harassing or damaging multiple tankers. Now, experts also say that Iran appears to be using older missiles and drones in the early waves, possibly aiming to saturate and wear down regional air defense systems before committing more advanced systems later in the conflict, a signal that its capability to threaten US assets and global shipping may not yet be fully spent. The region has also witnessed what many describe as an unprecedented combined drone and missile campaign by Iran and its proxies, aimed not only at military facilities but also at airports, ports, and critical infrastructure in the countries aligned with Washington. In fact, civilian airports and shipping hubs in multiple Middle Eastern countries have reportedly been struck, highlighting Iran's determination to make any collision against it pay a substantial economic and political price. Well, as the US escalates epic fury with ever more visible demonstration of its long-range strike power, Iran is showing that it can impose its own kind of cost through attrition drones, missile warfare, regional base attacks, and most importantly, the weaponization of choke points like the Strait of Hormuz. The result is a war in which American firepower dominates the skies and sea. But don't forget, Iranian resilience and reach ensure that the conflict reverberates across the Middle East and into the arteries of global economy, leaving the world watching a dangerous test of strength with no clear off-ramp in sight.